setting this up, beginning of the stream, I mentioned Die Hard. I don't consider it a Christmas horror movie, and I contradict myself in this list. I have to live with that. That's okay. Okay. But, you know, everybody loves Die Hard, so you're not missing too much on this list, all right? But one thing I did realize, and I did watch a couple movies and rewatch one movie just to level the playing field a little bit. It surprised me that there's quite a few movies that I had to leave off the list. And I thought I'd have a tough time coming up with 10 Christmas horror movies. But somehow I did it. Here's the honorable mentions. I'm just going to say these, rattle them off, okay? Okay, and then we're going to get into the slides, and I'll show you the actual movies, the countdown, okay? But honorable mentions, Christmas Evil. I watched Christmas Evil today for the first time. I will never get that 2 hours back. It was boring as fuck. Okay. Rare Exports. Haven't seen it yet. I put it on this, and I meant to watch it. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet. So, could be great, but I don't want to put it on the list if I haven't seen it. Another one I haven't seen yet, I'm going to watch, is Anna and the Apocalypse. I've been meaning to check that one out. Retaliators. And I just saw a list. I've never heard of that. Inside. I haven't seen Inside. That's like the freaking Spanish or French movie. I didn't know that takes place on Christmas. Holy crap. Puka on Hulu and I Trapped the Devil. These are movies that I didn't get a chance to see or they just didn't make the list, okay? There's a couple others that I mentioned within the list briefly, and you'll know why once we get there, okay? Because I do kind of want to mention them, okay? I do need to watch Inside, Mia. I'm excited for this. We're going to do some Christmas horror movies together. All right, this is fun. I've been waiting to do this, all right? Oh, yeah, more. The Conjuring 2. Didn't realize The Conjuring 2 was a Christmas movie. It did not make the list, all right? The Lodge. I didn't know The Lodge was on Christmas. That's interesting. And Edward Scissorhands. I love Edward Scissorhands to death, and it's a shame that it didn't make the list. Another one, and this is one you're going to really get pissed off at. It should have made the list, but it didn't. Nightmare Before Christmas. Oh my God, I owe you guys an apology. I can't believe Nightmare. But that should tell you how good these movies are. Okay, Nightmare. But the thing is, I've never been a massive Nightmare Before Christmas fan. It's okay. I like it for what it is. But yeah. All right, here we go. God, I'm excited. Here we go. I'll have a blue Christmas without you. All right, here we go. Number 10. Top 10 Christmas horror movies. All right. Number 10 is Better Watch Out. Somebody mentioned this one earlier today. I just gave this one another watch about a week ago. Very, very solid Christmas horror movie about this babysitting excursion. She's going to babysit this kid, and there is a killer running around the house. Do I want to make these spoilers? Is it okay if I spoil? Guys, can I put spoilers in here? Can I just at least give you a spoiler warning? You know, I could do that, all right? Because there's a spoiler in this movie that I definitely want to mention because it makes the movie so good. So, if you haven't seen Better Watch Out, spoiler warning at 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay? And Amanda, I'm going to tell you why it's not a perfect movie, all right? But, you know, and I think you predict this early on, that it's the kid that she's babysitting is the one that's the killer. He's just an evil little bastard. The best scene in the movie is the paint bucket scene. Kind of like Home Alone. He wants to see if he can pull off one of these Home Alone gags. And he tests it out on, I think, her boyfriend that shows up. And that's a pretty good scene. And it's really bloody. Even though they don't show it hitting the guy's face, but you can feel it when it happens. So it's a really good scene. Now, like Amanda was saying, the one thing that I don't like about this movie is she's tied up in this chair for way too long in the movie. I think they should have, that should have been less, okay? She's just tied up way too freaking long in the movie. And I was like, God, is she ever going to get out? You know, it was just kind of like, it wasn't perfect, but it's still a fun Christmas movie. You know, there's a lot of little tricks in there, little fun antidotes. And I dug it. I dug Better Watch Out. That is my number 10. Number 9 is Christmas Horror Story. And I was literally watching this again while I was putting my slides together. And if you haven't seen this movie, definitely check it out. It's an anthology, much like Trick or Treat. You know, it just feels like that type of movie. And I happen to love, I think there's 3 stories in it, and they're all just so entertaining. So entertaining. Of course, the big one is what you see in that picture right there. Krampus. The character of Krampus I found so entertaining, much more entertaining than the actual character of Krampus in the movie Krampus. Absolutely loved it. But also you got like these freaking, like, what would you call them guys? Like demon elves. You got an awesome Santa Claus that's like, you know, he's like, that Santa Claus could have been in Violent Night. He would have been great. And there's a big fight between him and Krampus at the end. But also you got this family, and I guess this kid is taken over by some entity or whatever. And like she finds out later in the movie that that's not her son. And there's a nasty kill involving him in the movie. So really good though. So number 8, you ready? Number 8, here we go. We were just talking about the character Krampus in A Christmas Horror Story. Number 8 is Krampus. And guys, I have a history with this movie, okay? I think Brandon was mentioning it earlier because he said that I don't like this movie. And he's right. I didn't like this movie. I watched it, I think, like 3 times. The first time I watched this movie was the worst theater experience of my entire life. And still to this day, it is the worst theater experience. Not because of the movie, but because of the young teenage girls that were like 10 seats down from me in the theater. I seriously I almost lost my shit. Like I could, you know, I've been to the theater a million times. And 99% of the time, it's a very pleasurable experience. You know, not always with the movie, but usually the people are good people. The occasional somebody holding their cell phone up, I don't ever have to say anything because usually the phone comes back down. But this, I don't know what was going on, but these teenage girls, they weren't there to watch the movie. All they wanted to do was cut up and see if they could get a reaction. Guys, it got so bad because I almost, actually, no, I did literally, because I was right there. I was like, excuse me, I'm trying to watch this movie. Can you please stop? They wouldn't stop. This woman in the in one of the front rows, she literally stood up, turned around, looked back at them, and she says, and I quote, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but pretty much, if you don't shut up, I'm going to make you shut up. That's literally what she said. She was pissed. And I was just, and then the entire theater went like this. Thank you very much. And I, still to this day, I'll never forget. And it ruined Krampus for me. And I think every time I watch the movie after, I'm reminded of that experience, and it just kind of taints the movie a little bit for me. So I said, you know what? If I'm going to do a Christmas horror list and everybody keeps saying how much they love this movie, I'm going to give it one more shot. And that's what I did. I watched it yesterday, guys. I was able to absorb the story and the overall meaning of the movie, and I ended up enjoying it so much more finally. Being dead honest, if I didn't enjoy it, it wouldn't be on the list, okay? And you heard a lot of the movies that I didn't put on this list. It was so good this time. And it just really, and maybe it's because I was really in that Christmas mood, because this is one of those movies that has one foot in wholesome Christmas and the other foot in Christmas horror, you know? And I think when that's done correctly, it's like the best of both worlds, you know? And I ended up loving this movie this time around. And it so much so that I think it might even go further up the list down the line. I just like the message of the movie, you know, and the whole premise behind Krampus as a character is that when the world is just in the darkest of darkest places and it feels like there's no good left in the world, Krampus comes in and he takes stock. And that's what happens in this movie. There's a character in this movie that you see in that picture there, Omi, the old lady. She was a child and she had to deal with Krampus, and he ended up killing her whole family when she was a child. And so she knows what this evil is, and she's kind of the bearer of bad news to everybody. This is what's happening right now, and he's going to kill everybody. Okay, he's going to take what's his, and he's going to leave one of you to spread the word that, hey, this is what happens when the world gets too dark. And that's what happened. But yeah, I really enjoyed this movie this time. It was really nice. And it does have a nice surprise ending, which I won't spoil. So, yeah, Krampus, I'm glad I finally, I guess, got this movie. I enjoyed it this time. Okay. Next one. And guys, let's see. All these movies from Krampus on are top-notch movies, which surprises me because I didn't think there were that many great Christmas movies. But I'm, and you're not gonna, you're gonna be mad at me on this one. Some of you are. I know a lot of people don't like this movie, but I love the Black Christmas 2006 remake. And one thing I like about it is that it's not a repeat of the first movie. It's very different, all the way down to the way they handled Billy. When I first watched this movie, and I've watched it probably 100 times now, but one thing that did irk me about the movie was Agnes. But now I even love Agnes, you know, because this movie is just so freaking zany and wacky. And I just love this cast that's in this movie with Michelle Trachtenberg, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Katie Cassidy. I can't remember the other girl's name. She was on Party of Five. But I think that's a big reason I love the movie is because I love the cast. As far as like set decoration, feeling very Christmassy, this movie does it probably the best out of this whole list. I love the cinematography in this movie. It is gorgeous, but it's not too pumped up to where it kind of takes away from the movie. It's just perfect. Perfect. Lacey Chabert. That's it, David. Thank you very much. I always have a blast with this movie. And by the way, guys, Gretchen Wieners. By the way, guys, the Blu-ray for this movie is not easy to find. Okay, it's pretty expensive. And it's the Canadian version, I think, and I have it. I bought it I got it for a good price years and years and years ago, and I'm glad I did because it's a pretty penny now, I think. But it's another movie that looks glorious in Blu-ray. You know, I'd love a 4K release, if I'm being honest. Okay, so next one. And I thought this movie would be higher, but I realized there's a lot of great Christmas horror movies. So here you go. Silent Night, Deadly Night, a classic in every sense of the word. I absolutely adore this movie. I like the whole backstory of it and how it was so controversial. By the way, guys, this movie beat out Nightmare on Elm Street. I believe they both came out on the same weekend, same time. And this movie was number one. But it was quickly removed from theaters because you have Santa Claus. I don't know if I can say this word without getting in trouble. He violates a mother on the street, you know, early in the movie. Okay. So it was pretty controversial back in the day. Now it's kind of tame, you know, for today's standards. But one thing I love about this movie too is it's the killer's point of view. It's really the backstory of Billy. You know, it doesn't really focus too much on the prey at all. It focuses on Billy. You see his backstory. And this is one of the few slashers that does that. So it's kind of fun. And you got one of the most iconic freaking kills I've ever seen with the antler kill with the great Linnea Quigley. One of my all-time favorite horror kills. You know, he lifts her naked body up. Well, she's got jean shorts on. And he hangs her on the antlers. And, you know, they show, you know, because sometimes you can show the aftermath of a kill. But no, they literally show her body, like the antlers. I think this is in the unrated cut, by the way, guys. Her antlers coming out of her torso. You got to watch the unrated version, too. That's the only way to watch this movie. So good. Punish. I wanted to put part 5 and the remake on this list, but they didn't make the list. But I definitely want to mention them here and part 2. This is a really good franchise for a lot of different reasons. You know, part 3 is horrible. And it's sad because it's got Bill Moseley in it, you know, Chop Top. And they completely waste him. So 3's the worst movie. Doesn't belong on any countdown, but except for worst horror movies. But 2 is great just because of like the backstory of it and how it's pretty much the first 45 minutes are a repeat of the first movie. Like, you don't really have to watch the first movie if you want to just get the story of it. You could jump right to part 2 and it would give you that. But yeah, like Destiny said, it's so bad it's good. Like, and you have the Garbage Day, you know, I think his name's Ricky. That guy, the performance he gave in that movie was just legendary. And the story, the backstory, I can give you a little bit of the backstory for part 2, is they had 2 actors that were trying out for the part. And the actor that didn't get the job was the better actor. But it was more kind of straight on. The actor that got the job, his acting was so bad that it made the movie what it was. And it was good. And just the way he delivered, like, the, I guess, the money lines, you know, legendary, just legendary. Garbage Day. Oh my God. I can, it's a movie that I can throw on at any time and just laugh at it and enjoy it. You know, it's a festive Christmas movie, part 2. Sometimes I think I like part 2 more than the first movie. And that's cheating to say that because half the movie is part 1, but it's like you get the best parts of part 1 in part 2. And then you get a whole new movie for the second half of the movie. So, I don't know. I think I kind of prefer part 2, but part 1 has to go on the list, right? It's got to go on the list. The Toy Maker is just complete batshit insane, crazy. And I'm not going to talk too much about that one, but I just like that one scene where the toys start attacking this couple in the bed. And one of the toys goes, how do I put this? Up the guy's butt, okay? That's all I'm going to say. All right. It's great. I love part 5, The Toy Maker. All right. And the remake's good too. I like the remake. And it's a completely different story, but it works. But the remake is a whodunit. And guys, let me tell you, I've watched the remake probably 20 times now. If you asked me, okay, Lee, who's the killer in the remake? Who is the guy in the Santa suit? I still can't tell you to this day. I forget it every time. That's how unmemorable the reveal is in the remake. But the movie itself is fun. All right, next one. Top 5, guys. Top 5. Number 5, Violent Night. And this is pretty much Die Hard. And that's why I said I'm kind of wrong for not including Die Hard and including Violent Night. But we'll do it just because Violent Night's new. And it's so good. Like, it's really, really good. What's up, Antonis? It's like I just said. It's Die Hard. But instead of John McClane, it's Santa Claus. And I almost think the way this movie got made was they were probably sitting around a table and saying, you know, everybody always has this argument about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So why don't we give them a Die Hard Christmas movie? Okay? And so that's pretty much what they do. They give you a Die Hard Christmas movie, and there's no doubt that it's a Christmas movie. But the kills are great. The Home Alone segment of the movie had probably one of the biggest, loudest outbursts of a theater crowd that I have ever had. There's a scene, I won't spoil it if you haven't seen it, but there's a scene where the little girl, she's up in the attic, and she already has all these booby traps set up. And you got that attic ladder that goes down. And the killer, he wants to come up the ladder. And you already know, oh boy, they got something in store. And I'll just say that the Home Alone section is like the booby traps in Home Alone on steroids, okay? And one of the moments in that scene when he's going up those stairs, the audience, I mean, including myself, we just erupted. Like, oh my God, that was the greatest thing I've seen all year. So, yeah, Violent Night happily earns a place on this countdown. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. It's so freaking fun. Also, Edie Patterson from the Righteous Gemstones. What a talent. She is so freaking funny. This movie, it's a comedy. It's definitely a comedy with some bloody moments in it, and David Harbour's excellent as Santa. So what more do you need? Okay. Top 4. Here we go, guys. Number 4. We're rolling through these. Okay. Number 4 is P2. Guys, anytime I get a chance to recommend P2 to anybody, I jump all over it. And it still surprises me that nobody outside of horror, I guess, talks about this movie at all. And you know what? Let alone the Christmas aspect of it, it's a fucking good movie. It's one of those movies that is in one location in this parking structure, and it's two characters, and one of them is a psycho, and he's like obsessed with this girl. And I think it's so good because it's so relatable, and a lot of women can probably relate to having a situation like this where there's a stalker and this guy that just will not leave you alone. Imagine if you work with the guy, you know? I think he's like a security guard or something like that. But it's Christmas Eve and she's trapped in this parking structure, and he is completely making her life a living hell, you know? Rachel Nichols is excellent in this movie too. I was surprised that her career didn't go farther, because she definitely has that final girl quality about her. Loved her in this movie. But yeah, fantastic movie. P2. And I guarantee there's a lot of you that still haven't seen this movie. I saw it in the chat. There's a few of you that said still haven't seen P2. I'm telling you, it's so good, guys. Watch it. Watch it tonight after this, okay? You will have a blast. It's another one that's hard to find. I don't even think there's a Blu-ray out for this movie. I have the DVD. I've had it for years. But yeah. Okay. Number three. What's it going to be, guys? We got 3 left. Number 3. Currently streaming on Tubi. P2. Thank you, Destiny. Okay. Number 3. Here we go. Boom. Oh, man. I'm so happy. Christmas. Bloody Christmas. Guys. Oh, my God. I adored this movie so much. And I went into it not expecting much of anything at all. Okay. I wasn't very familiar with Joe Begos' work. And he had only done a couple movies before this, but I went in expecting something really like zany because of what the premise is. It's a robot Santa Claus. So I expected this to be very tongue-in-cheek, funny, comedic, with some bloody kills along the way. And to my surprise, it's none of those things. It's very serious, you know, much like the tone of the first Terminator. They didn't have to do that, but that's what they did. And it starts off with this really great banter between these two characters. And I knew that this was the aspect that was going to make it or break it for some people. I just knew that. And Brandon hated this movie because of these two characters. Me and Brandon are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum because of this movie. And I get that. This type of dialogue, it's not for everybody. To me, it felt very Tarantino, if I'm being honest. If you've watched some Tarantino movies where there's just a long, lingering scene of dialogue, that's what this has. It's these two characters, and you're getting to know them in real time, and they're having this great banter with each other, talking about pop culture, talking about movies and music, and the chemistry is just permeating between. Like, you see the chemistry in real time between these two characters, and you're just eating it up and loving it. At least I was. But I knew that this is the type of movie that's not for everybody. A lot of people, they want, introduce me to the characters, give me the beats like A, B, and C, get me from A to B to C, and then let's move on to the Killer Santa, because a lot of people are going to go into a movie about a robot Santa, and that's what they're going to want. They're just going to want robot Santa. Just give me superficial characters, that's fine, and let's just get, because most of these movies on this list are just that. That's what they are. But this movie goes much deeper with the characters, and you spend a good portion with them before the action really ramps up. But to me, that actually benefits the movie, because when the action ramps up, it never lets up. I mean, it never lets up. And it gets 4 on the floor crazy. Batshit crazy. By this point, it's obvious how much of an homage this is to the first Terminator. And I don't think I've ever seen a movie so much like the first Terminator since the first Terminator. And man, I was just eating it up. And that young lady right there, I think her name's Tori. It's either Tori or Tony in the movie. Oh my gosh, she was fantastic. Like, if I'm putting out a new Final Girl list in the next year, she's definitely on it. She kicks so much ass in this movie. And this is my favorite type of Final Girl. I really don't want to say don't like, but I prefer a Final Girl to not be pretty much like the female Rambo. I like her to have to learn something along the way. But you can tell by her attitude in the first portion of the movie that she is a spitfire. You know? I even mentioned there's a lot of cursing between these two characters, but it felt natural, you know? And I knew that would throw some people off too. Some people, they just don't like a lot of cursing in movies, and I get that. And most of the time, I don't like it unless there's a purpose. But these two, it just felt like that's who these characters were, you know? That's why it worked for me. But man, I loved her in this. You know, you want her to survive, you know, and boy, she goes through hell. She goes through bloody hell in this movie. So yeah, Christmas, Bloody Christmas. I knew that this would be at least in my top 3, and yes, it landed right at my number 3. It's that good, okay? And in years to come, it might move up to number 2. Okay, it'll never move up to number 1 because number 1 is just like one of my all-time favorite films ever. You probably know what it is. But anyway, let's go to number 2. Number 2. And this might surprise you. Gremlins. Number 2. Gremlins is just such a great movie. And I think it's PG. Or is it PG-13? I can't remember. Because this is right around the time when PG-13 was just starting. But it's just a really good story. When it all comes down to it, I love Gremlins just because of how cute Gizmo is, the Mogwai, because it's really the opposite ends of the spectrum. And you know, and when the cute, cuddly little thing that you love so much turns into this like ultimate evil, and then you take that evil and you give it the opportunity to multiply. And like, I remember watching this, and I was like, oh my God, just the gremlin alone is a nightmare. And so when they jump in that pool, that one scene where Stripe jumps in the pool and it just starts multiplying by 100, you can feel the danger. You know, there's some scary moments in this movie, and there's also some very heartfelt moments, you know, because of the great characters. Phoebe Cates, the scene where she's talking about her father dying because he was dressed up like Santa Claus and he broke his neck, and it's a really heartfelt scene. But yeah, Gremlins is just fantastic, and it definitely has that like Steven Spielberg vibe to it. Joe Dante directed the movie, but I think it's a Steven Spielberg production. I know he produced like this one and Poltergeist and a few movies back then. It just has that, you know, Steven Spielberg suburban type feel to it, and it's just great characters and just the story. You know, the 3 rules. You know, you don't feed them after midnight. Never get them wet. And what was the other rule, guys? Guys, I always forget what the 3 rules. I know those 2. Those are like the 2 big ones. Feed them after midnight. Never get them wet. And what was Jenna Ortega talking about? I can't remember. There was one other rule though. Okay. No light. Don't put any light on them. That was it. Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. And number 1 is going to be no surprise to anybody. Of course, it's Black Christmas. One of my all-time favorite films. I first heard about Black Christmas through Halloween. I saw the 25 Years of Terror documentary that came out in 2003. And watching the beginning of the documentary, and they're mentioning these movies, and then all of a sudden they mention Black Christmas. I literally paused the DVD that I was watching. Whoa, what was that? because they showed a scene from Black Christmas, and they said Black Christmas was a big influence for Halloween. And so immediately I went and looked up this movie because I'm like, nobody ever talks about this movie. This was this was 2003 when I first heard about it. Back in 2003, I didn't hear people talking about Black Christmas that much at all. Really, what makes Black Christmas so great is I just like that 70s feel. It feels very like almost dirty and grindhouse a little bit, but yet it has the most beautiful Christmas lighting throughout. You got that kill right there with Claire, which is such an iconic kill that's been paid homage to quite a few times throughout the years. But when you get right down to it, and this is a very debatable statement, but I think Black Christmas set the template for the modern slasher today. I really do. You could go as far back as like Bay of Blood, from the 60s, late 60s. That kind of set the template for the camp slasher. But I think Black Christmas set the template for the, I guess what you would call the neighborhood slasher, kind of like Halloween. And it's still one of the best ever made, you know? I loved the characters in this movie, you know, with Margot Kidder. These were strong, intelligent women. And this is something that Bob Clark stated. He wanted characters that were college students, that were strong, that were resourceful. Not just one of them, but all of them. And they end up getting killed anyway, you know? Like when Margot Kidder, her character Barb, gets killed in the movie, you know, you feel for her. And this movie does take a while. Like there's a kill at the beginning of the movie, and there's this whole like investigation, and the whole time Billy's up in the attic. You know, this predates When a Stranger Calls. You know, the killer in the attic who's using the phone. Those phone calls are really, really creepy still to this day, saying some really obscene things to these women. Peeping Tom, thank you, Destiny. Yeah, like you could chart it back over and over and over again. But to me, I think there is definitely a case to be made for Black Christmas, you know, in terms of just the layout of the movie. You know, it really kind of made a template, even for Halloween. I mean, you can even compare the opening to this movie to the opening of Halloween. But, you know, I don't know if it was an accident that Bob Clark made such a great movie. And what I was saying earlier about the internet, I think the internet gave this movie a new life, you know. Quentin Tarantino himself had his own private reel of this movie in the 90s. You know, this was one of his favorite movies. So it's great that it eventually found its audience, but a movie that's this good was destined to find its audience anyway. It was going to happen just because of how amazing this movie is. Can you imagine if this movie got lost in time and nobody like ever found it? It's crazy. So it will be a miracle if any movie ever topped this movie for me in terms of greatest Christmas horror movie of all time. You know, it's just so good. It's a treasure is what this movie is. Kyle, I laughed at all the hidden spots for her booze. Yes. Yeah. What was she? The house sitter or housekeeper or something like? She was hilarious in this too. You know, all the characters felt real too, you know, and I think that's one thing I love about that time period of horror movies is more times than not, the characters felt like real people next door to you. They didn't feel like supermodels, you know, which is what you get a lot these days. You know, everybody looks slick and, you know, they look like almost too pretty. And it just felt more real, more like a neighborhood. So, yeah. I love freaking Black Christmas 1974 so much. Canadian movie, and it's just a classic.